We welcome you to the Lighthouse in Cherry Tree, Pennsylvania, with founders and pastors Ken and Wilda Brown. And now, let's go into the service already in progress.
I got a message on my heart this morning. I want to talk about wrestling with God. How many of you have ever felt like you've wrestled with God? Come on. I believe that, over the last 16, 17, 18 weeks, whatever we are on right now with this whole pandemic, it feels like you're on a fight. Sometimes we feel like we're in a fight with man, don't we? We feel like we're in a fight with this world, but sometimes I believe, my friends, there's just a little bit of an underlying thing where we may be actually in a fight with God. And I believe that sometimes we can fight with God so much that there's a blessing that's going to come out of it if we just know how to wrestle correctly. Come on, did you hear what I said? Come on. So this morning I want to talk about wrestling with God. You probably already know where I'm going with this. So go ahead and go to Genesis chapter 32. Genesis chapter 32, and we're going to start with verse 24. Genesis chapter 32, verse 24. And when you're there, say there. And this is what it says. Then Jacob was left alone. How many of you, maybe over the last 18 weeks or so, have felt alone a little bit? Come on, hello. You felt alone. Maybe you feel alone just because maybe your spouse has passed away or whatever, but maybe some of you have felt alone because you haven't been able to socialize with people like you used to. Maybe your job has been just completely canceled out. You've been laid off for 18, 19 weeks. You don't have any coworkers. You've been locked up in your house, told don't go out. Come on, hello. I remember that when this first happened, I locked myself in my house for 2-3 weeks, and I just sat there and I said, well, I can't go out. They said I'm going to die. So I stocked up on water, food, and I didn't leave the house. And you know what I started to feel? I started to feel alone. And then when I started to feel alone, guess what else came with it? Depression, fear, worry, anxiety, butterfly stomach. Come on. Look what it says here. It says that Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. My friends, I feel that right now, during this critical time that we are in this nation, maybe even in our lives personally, there is a struggle, and the struggle is real, but we have to know, how do we overcome the struggle? How do we overcome the wrestling that we are dealing with right now? Because I want to tell you, well, as we go on in this passage, we will see that Jacob wrestles with man, but my friends, he is wrestling with God at the same time. And it says here he was alone. And as he was alone, it says, when he was alone, he began to wrestle with the man until the breaking of day. Pretty much all night long, he wrestled. How many of you have ever been in prayer time and you just wrestled till the next morning? Come on. Oh, my. You've wrestled with God. Maybe you've wrestled with over an unsaved loved one, or your child that might be on drugs or just far away from God. You've wrestled all night long. And you're waiting for something, some kind of breakthrough to happen. Just to back up a little bit on this story, before Jacob even begins to wrestle with God, even before he even felt that lonely state, the reason he had felt lonely was because of this. I'll give you a little bit of a backstory of what's happening here. Jacob gets word that his brother is on his way to come meet him. And he knows that when his brother comes, it's a 50-50 chance that he's either going to get wiped out or his brother's going to make amends. And I tell you what, right now, Jacob is thinking, man, this isn't good. He's going to come. And we all know the reason why. It was because Jacob had stolen the birthright of his brother, and he thinks, man, my brother's out. He's going to come kill my livestock, my family, everything that I've worked for is going to be wiped out because my brother is in anger with me. He hates me. He wants to destroy me. How many of you have ever thought some of the worst case scenarios that have never happened? Come on. Come on, my worry words in here, how many do I have in here? You worry nonstop about dumb stuff that just never happens. And this is where Jacob is right now. He is confused. He is worried that everything's going to be wiped out. He's going to lose everything because he gets word that Esau's coming. And not only is he's coming with 400 men. There's an army that seems like it's on the horizon, and it's coming straight toward Jacob, and he feels he's going to lose it all. See, my friends, right now during this whole COVID-19 thing, this pandemic, you might feel, I don't know what the next day is going to bring me. What if everything I've worked for in my life, my whole life savings, everything that I got, it's just going to be lost? Come on now. Come on, hello. Well, my friends, I want to tell you that there's a blessing that God has coming. If you just learned how to wrestle correctly. Stop wrestling with your thoughts. Stop wrestling with these fears. Stop wrestling with these things that are going on in the world and let God just take control. Come on. When I was younger, when I was in first grade, I started watching wrestling on TV. Well, how many of you are big-time wrestling watchers in here? I haven't watched it for over 20 years, but when I was 7, 8 years old, I was in first grade. I told my mom, I said, Mom, I'm watching Hulk Hogan and the Iron Sheik and all these guys on TV and B. Brian Blair and, all these wrestlers from the 80s. And I said, Mom, I want to sign up for wrestling. And she went and she signed me up for wrestling. And I got my little uniform and I went to practice every Wednesday night. And my first match came and guess what happened? I lost. My second match came, you know what happened? I lost. The whole season went through. Guess how many matches I won? 0. Second year came back around. My mom signed me right back up for wrestling. I went for wrestling every practice, every match I was there. Guess how many matches I won that season? 0. Third season comes around. I'm now in third grade and I'm wrestling. And I wrestle almost halfway through the year. Didn't win anything. And then finally I won, but it was only because of one reason. It was by default. It was just a tie. So when you actually would win a match, they would give you a little button pin to put on your hat that they gave you or on your wrestling uniform, and it had a little skull and crossbone with a little Buccaneer hat on because they were called the Buccaneers. So I got this one pin for winning, and my dad still has that pin to this day because he's proud of it because that was the only match his son ever won. Finally, the fourth year came around, and I signed back up. I still didn't win anything. At one point in time, I'm wrestling, and I went up against this kid. He was probably maybe about 15, 20 pounds bigger than me. And this kid, I'll tell you, he had me down on the ground. I couldn't breathe. I was, oh! He just had me pinned down on the ground. At one point in time, I could hear my mother yelling from the stands, "Somebody get that kid off my boy!" And she looks at this lady sitting right next to her on the right-hand side, and she says, "Look how much bigger that kid is than my son." And the lady looked back at her and said, "That's my boy." My mom just sat there and stayed quiet. Finally, after that whole season was over, I was like, I'm done. this just isn't worth it. I thought that I would like it, but it was horrible. And I gave up. And I think this is what happens. We feel sometimes we can only wrestle for so long until we start giving up ourselves. That we stop fighting the battle. We stop fighting the battle with man because we just give up. How many of you have ever fought a battle with man and just gave up? Come on, I want to tell you, I had a battle a couple times in my life. One was probably about a quarter mile down the road. But I want to tell you that there's these battles that we go through where we just give up. I've been there, my friends. I've gave up on battles. I'm done with the battle. I'm done with the fight. But my friends, I want to tell you there's going to come a time where God will say, you need to stay strong. Come on, how many know that God wants you to stay strong in your battles? He wants you to be encouraged right now to don't give up in the fight, don't give up in the battle, because He's about ready to give you a blessing. Come on. Hearing what I'm saying? Isn't this what these prophetic words were this morning that we heard? That there's a fight, there's a battle, but He's going to overcome? Come on. Take a look at verse 25. Now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint, and he wrestled with him. Now I was reading this last week a little bit before I came here to preach this, and something jumped out at me, Pastor Wilder, that I'd never seen there before. It says that God was wrestling with him and saw that Jacob was prevailing against him. That he couldn't fight Jacob because Jacob was putting up too much of a what? A fight. Look at this again. Look at this. What it says in verse 25. Now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. I'd never seen that before. That Jacob was putting up such a fight with God that God felt like he couldn't prevail. Think about that, my friends. Think about sometimes when you're fighting so much against God and what He's trying to do, the blessing He's trying to give. How many of you have ever tried to say, I want to do it my own way? Come on. And God's like, well, whatever. If that's what you want to do, I'm going to give you what you want. But here it says that when he saw that he could not prevail against him. My friends, sometimes we can put up such a fight with God that we are putting up such a fight that He can't prevail. And it's not that God can't prevail against you. Believe me, God can pin you down in 3 seconds flat. Okay? But this is a spiritual battle that I'm talking about. We can put such a fight up with God in the spirit realm that He can't prevail because we are being too stubborn. Come on, are you getting what I'm saying here this morning? So I want to ask you, not a physical fight this morning, but are you in a spiritual fight with God this morning that He can't even prevail against you because you're being so stubborn? Come on now. I heard some. I've literally just heard some toes curling up underneath the seats just now. My friends, are you fighting with God so much that He can't even prevail? He can't even get to the point of where He wants to bless you because you're putting up such a fight this morning. Look what it goes on and says. That he put his hip out of socket. I may know that sometimes you'll have some battle scars. You'll have a wound from fighting with God. Just think about this. That was something that he had to deal with for the rest of his life, was a limp. And when people would see him, they would say, why is Jacob limping? And somebody would say, well, he fought with God and lost. Look what it goes on there in verse 26. And he said, let me go, for the day breaks. Sounds like Jacob's putting up a pretty good fight. Even after God put his hip out of place, out of socket. He's still fighting with him. How many of you know that sometimes we're so thick-headed that we'll just keep on fighting with God? Look what it says there. It says, and then he said, let go, for the day breaks. But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Now see, on the other side of this spectrum, we see that Jacob's saying, listen, you've done put my hip out of place. I got nothing else to lose. My brother's going to be here any hour, any day now. And he might wipe me out, so what else do I got to lose? Because he feels he's already in a fight with man, and he might as well just get it over with fighting with God. I'm not going to let you go. Isn't it something that once we got to the point of where we feel like we got nothing else left to lose, we're like, okay, well, I got nothing else left to lose, God. I'm going to fight with you until you give me that blessing. Is that maybe where you're at this morning? Maybe you're just at that point where it hasn't been a bad fight, but it's been a good fight. Come on. It's been a good wrestling with God. That you know that you've wrestled, you've prevailed until you receive that blessing. Come on, how many know that this stuff can make you tough sometimes? Come on, hello, did you hear what I said? Yes. Stuff can make you tough sometimes. I remember when I was little, after my whole wrestling phase that I was in, I decided I wanted to start taking karate then. And my dad was already, he had taken judo and had a black belt in that. He took kung fu and he had a red sash in that. So he had pretty much made his way in both forms of those different styles, judo and kung fu. And I remember right before I wanted to take it, my dad would start teaching me some kung fu moves and some judo moves. And I remember we would be in the living room, and I'd be about 9 years old or so, and my dad would be grabbing my arm and flipping me over his head and stuff like that. And I remember at one point in time, my mom sitting in the kitchen counter, yelling in the living room, saying, "Rich, cut that out, you're going to hurt him." And I remember my dad yelling back at my mom, saying, "I'm only trying to toughen the boy up. Keep quiet, Nance." And when my mom was yelling at my dad saying, "Cut it out, Rich, you're going to hurt him," I was like, "Yeah, Dad, cut it out. This hurts." You know? You got my arm tied behind my back. You got me flipped over your shoulder. You know? My friend, sometimes there's that tough love that God gives when he wrestles with you. Hello, did you hear what I said? There's that tough love that God gives when we wrestle with him. How many are ready for God to just give you some tough love in this house this morning? Isn't it something that when tough love comes, we either don't want to hear it and we run from it, or we stay and we say, "Okay, I just let me learn, Lord, how to submit under what you're trying to do for me." Those are the only two routes you can take. The only two routes you can take. Take a look at this next one. Where were we at? Did we leave off on 26? Yeah. 27. So he said to him, "What is your name?" He said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed." So I want to ask you this morning, how many of you feel like you're in a fight right now with man? Huh? With all this stuff that's happening right now in the world, do you feel like you're struggling with men in the earth, with man in the earth? My friends, I tell you what, every day I look on the news and I see something every day, and I was like, man, why? Whether it's with certain officials that are trying to mandate different stuff, it just always feels like there's a constant battle with man, doesn't it? We constantly feel like we're in battle with man. And I don't care where it is, whatever you're doing in life, there's always some kind of constant battle that we have going on with man. I remember a couple weeks ago, I was driving down the road. This guy thought that I wasn't moving fast enough, so he gets right up on my bumper. He's just blowing his horn. He's hand gestures and all that, and he did that for like 15 minutes. And I pulled off the side of the road. He pulled off the side of the road, and then I get back on the road. I was like, "What's it want?" You know? I was like getting ready. I was like, you know, am I going to have to pull my taser out or what? Yeah, I carry tasers. Because when you're traveling to different states, you can't take a gun with you. So, but there seems like there's always a constant battle, doesn't it? Always seems like there's a constant struggle with man. My friends, I want to tell you, you're not going to be able to leave that while you're on this earth. If you are having a hard time being able to not learn how to struggle against man, you're going to have a rough life until you get out of this earth and God calls you home. You are never going to stop the struggle with man. You're not going to be able to run from it. You're not going to be able to get away from it. There's always going to be that constant struggle with man. But I believe in that constant struggle, there's always going to be able to prevail at the same time. Come on, did you hear what I said? Even though there's that constant struggle all the time, you will be able to prevail. Look what it says. And he said, that your name shall be, because you have prevailed against, what verse was that, 27 that we left off on? 28. He says here, but Israel, your name shall be Israel, for you have struggled with God and with man and have prevailed. How many know that I believe that just because there's a struggle with man doesn't mean that you will not prevail? Because I want to tell you, if you're prevailing with God, you will always be prevailing against who? It's how you're fighting with God, though, how you're wrestling with God, how your struggle is with God is going to show how your struggle and how you're going to prevail against man. Come on, hello. You can't prevail against man unless you're prevailing with God and winning with Him first. So the key thing we need to do is learn how to wrestle with God and prevail. And once you do that, then your struggle with man won't be so hard anymore. Come on, hello. You know, I remember when I first got called out of pastoring into evangelism, traveling as an evangelist. Man, I had some struggles with man. Not only when I was pastoring, but once I got out, I left the last church I was at, moved in with my in-laws for 6 months, had no job, no home. And I would sit in my father-in-law's basement 6 to 8 hours a day calling pastors on the phone and them hanging up on me. Just nonstop. Nonstop. I would make 150 phone calls a day. Get no more than 5 pastors on the phone. And out of those 5 pastors, I would only book 1 or 2 churches. Man, I'll tell you what, that's a struggle with man. But it wasn't until I started learning how to win the fight with God that I learned how to start winning the fight with man. I just kept on saying, God, you've called me to this, you're going to have to open up the doors. And before I knew it, while I was sitting in my father-in-law's basement trying to figure out how to build a schedule, within the next couple of weeks, I had a year and a half booked out and don't even know how it even happened. And I want to tell you, for the last 8-9 years, that's the way it's been. I will sit down, and I don't even know how my calendar gets filled. Because it's just a God thing. How many know that when you're in God's will, He'll have a... And the battle won't seem like it's so hard anymore. The only battle I have now in pastoring or in traveling as an evangelist is churches trying to keep the doors open for me to be able to get there now. That's the only struggle I got. Laura and I, we've The last date we had actually preached was March 15th. And the day after that, they shut everything down. And that whole time, from March 15th all the way to the second week of July, we got cancellations just straight through. From March 15th all the way to the second week of July. And I remember sitting in my kitchen saying, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? How many of you ever been there? What are you going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Am I going to have to go get a job? What am I going to do? You know? And I remember everybody said, well, you know, you're considered a, you know, if you're an evangelist, they put you under the gig worker category. So they said, you can sign up for the pandemic gig workers. So I went and tried to sign up for that. That didn't work. You can't even get anybody on the phone there. How many of you have dealt with unemployment here in the last 3 months? There ain't nobody picking up no phone there. So what do I do? What do I do? What do I do, Lord? And from March 15th all the way up till July 2nd, I was canceled completely out. And then in May, when they had said that churches could start meeting at 25 people at a time, I got 3 phone calls right off the bat. And I was able to book the last 3 weeks in May. And then the whole month of June was just completely canceled out again. Because all those churches were running 500 people or so, and you know, they had to shut them down. But I want to tell you something, my friends. This is the reason why I'm telling you this story. I may have been off the road for almost 18 weeks, but God was allowed to see me through. Come on, did you hear what I said? God saw me through. I'll tell you, at one point in time, when March 20th rolled around and I was like, what am I going to do? I started wrestling with God. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Come on, what are you going to do for me, God? You know? Oh my, did God show up and show off? Come on. I want to show you how good God is. Come on, how many of you actually know how good God is in this room? From March 15th all the way up to the second week of July, pretty much, I was canceled. I was able to book up those first 2 weeks of July, too. But I was off probably a total of, out of the 18, 19 weeks, I was probably off close to, what would you say, hon, about 15 maybe? 15 weeks? I want to show you how good God was. I would go to the post office for our ministry. Maybe once or twice a week. And there would be checks in there every time I'd go. Every time I'd go, there would be checks there. I was getting checks from churches I had never even preached at. Did you hear what I said? I was getting churches, I had got at least 3 or 4 churches that I'd never even preached at. They just send me checks. I was hitting my budget of what I have when I'm on the road, not being on the road. And it was like the exact amount was coming in every week of what I missed off the road was coming in every week for almost 15 weeks. Every week, it was like the exact amount was coming in of what I need to pay my bills, my mortgage, my car payment. It was there just like that. And it was like the exact amount what I needed on the road. So I want to tell you this morning, my friends, don't think that your struggle is in vain this morning. Don't think that your wrestling with God is not ever going to prevail, because maybe, if you remember, maybe you're just fighting against God too much and He can't do nothing on your behalf. Here's what I like to say. Why don't you just go back to just do what I did when I was in first grade? Wrestle with God enough to let Him pin you so that He can win. Because I want to tell you, my friends, if you let God win, there's going to be a blessing. Come on, hello. Look what it goes on and says here. Verse 29. Then Jacob asked, saying, tell me your name, I pray. And he said, why is it that you ask about my name? And he blessed him there. What did he do? Blessed him. Now, what does a blessing look like to you? Come on. Let me ask you, what does a blessing look like? Having your bills paid? Being cured of cancer? Being able to live a life of normalcy in a time of a pandemic? Come on, hello. Isn't that a blessing? I'll tell you what, a few weeks back I was down in South Carolina. It was like they didn't even know what a pandemic was. People walking around, no masks on, everything. It was like things were back to normal. To me, that was a blessing. You go down West Virginia, it's pretty much the same thing. It's like, what pandemic? You know, it's almost like it's normal. And don't get me wrong, I feel like there's something out there. I just, why live in the fear? Right? You can take precautions. There's nothing wrong with taking precautions, wearing a mask in a store, but man, I ain't going to live in fear, though. I believe we can have precaution and not live in fear at the same time. Come on, either say amen or oh me on that. Come on. So look what it goes on. He says, and he blessed him there. Verse 30. So Jacob called the name of that place Peniel. Now that word Peniel, if you look it up in the Hebrew, it means to see God's face. To see God face to face. To see the face of God. That's what that word actually means. Peniel. In the Hebrew actually means to see God face to face. To see His face. How many know that when you're wrestling with God, there's that one-on-one connection that you have with Him? Come on, hello. Whether, this is a physical level, but on a spiritual level, we're going after God face to face. Doesn't the Bible say, seek my face? Come on. If you seek me with all your heart, you shall find me. We need to be seeking the face of God. And this word Peniel, it actually means to see God face to face. Look what it even goes on and says. It says, he named that place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. It was spared. How many know that we need to seek God's face this morning? To go after Him. When it says here that he saw God face to face, think about when people wrestle. How many people have watched wrestling? I asked that question here before. Come on. How many of you ever at least saw a wrestling match in your life, on TV or something? What is the very first thing that they end up doing when the bell rings? Huh? Come on, what do? Tom, they lock up face to face, don't they? Huh? That's what they do. They lock up, they get face to face with one another, and they have a face-off, don't they? You don't ever see them just walk up to one another and just stand there like this, right? No, they get in and they lock head to head, face to face. My friends, I want to tell you, when we're wrestling with God this morning, we're wrestling with Him face to face. We're getting up in the face of God and saying, man, I'm taking your challenge this morning. I want to tell you, there's still going to be one winner out of that, amen? And it won't be you. It says he saw God face to face. And his life was preserved. Let me ask you something. Do you think that being able to seek God's face, to see God face to face, to wrestle with him, to go one-on-one with him, face to face, wouldn't you think that there's some kind of bond there? Some kind of friendship, right? And let me tell you the reason why I'm saying this, because I find this so interesting. I was preaching out of town 2 weeks ago, out near Philadelphia, and I was in a restaurant. And when I was in this restaurant, the manager had came over and was talking to Laura and I. And he said, I guess he picked up on my, what sort of accent I have, whatever. He says, oh, where are you guys from? I said, well, we're near Pittsburgh area down in Washington County. He says, no way. He says, I went to such and such high school. I said, oh, well, yeah, that was, I didn't go to that school. I went to that school for 2 years when I was in second, third grade. But I said, I ended up moving to another school. He's like, oh, yeah, we used to wrestle them. And he started telling me about how he had, been this big-time wrestler, and won all these awards and all that. And even after that, I think he got a scholarship to go on to college, and he wrestled for college. But he started telling me this, which I found pretty interesting. And I had to throw it in this message because it just fits it so well. He said, when I used to wrestle, he says, we would wrestle Chartiers Houston, we would wrestle McGuffey, we would wrestle and Mac. He said, we would wrestle all these schools, but when we would wrestle these other kids from these other schools, we would end up becoming best friends. And he said, we would end up hanging out with one another. And he says, even 20 years later, 25 years, 30 years later, I'm still friends with these kids who went to other schools, but it was because we wrestled against one another in a match when we were in high school that we continued to stay friends after the fight. And it started getting me to think about this. He said, most of these MMA fighters and all these wrestlers and stuff, do you know that right after they're done with these MMA fights and all that, how many of you have ever seen an MMA fight or anything like that? No. He said these guys actually go out and they eat, they go on vacation together, they're best friends. He says that's how it is. It's almost like a code, he said, that once you go face to face with somebody and you wrestle against somebody, you've now become friends and got this common bond together. Do you know what I'm saying here? Come on, if you think about it, and then, the first thing that popped into my head, I don't know if this popped into your head when I was telling you this story, but the first thing that popped up in my head was Rocky II. How many remember Rocky II? Come on, Apollo and Stallone were not friends throughout that whole movie. But at the end, after they had fought one another, they had what for each other? Respect. And at the end of the movie, they become best friends, don't they? And going on into 3 and 4, they're still best friends. Because there becomes that common bond, my friends. I believe that when we wrestle with God and we come face to face with Him, we come into an agreement with one another. We come into an agreement with God and we say, Lord, we're no longer fighting against one another, but we're fighting for the same thing. And that's to see you move me forward in life, to see that blessing come to where I need it in life. Come on. Amen. Would you just stand to your feet right now? Would you go ahead and just lift your hands all across this room this morning? And I want you to begin praising God right now. I want you to start thanking Him for the battles that are being won in your... Come on. It's all right. Somebody started to clap. Somebody started to give praise. It's all right. I want you to start giving thanks right now. I want you to start thanking God for the battle that's been won in your place. Come on. He is fighting your battles this morning. You no longer have to fight against man. You don't ever have to fight any longer against God. He is fighting your battles. Come on, come on. Would you just begin to lift up a shout of praise? Would you just begin to worship Him? Would you just begin to just give Him a shout right now? Come on, just begin to lift Him up. Just thank Him for the battle, for the victory that's been won. Come on, for the victory that's been won. Come on, I know you got more in you this morning than that, Lighthouse. Come on. Lift Him up. Thank Him for the battle. Thank Him for the battle. Worthy. Worthy. Come on, even right now, I know that right now what's going on all across this sanctuary, there may be a few of you right now, you're in a battle right now with God, and you're fighting with Him, and you're saying, I'm not going to give up until you bless me. You might have a scar to go with it. It might be a hip out of place, but I want to tell you, there will be a token. There will be some kind of momentous occasion that you will remember that you fought with God. There was a battle, but there was also victory in it too. Come on, go after Him. Come on, go face to face with God right now. Come on, go after that victory fight right now.
If this broadcast has been a blessing to you, we invite you to watch a new service every Sunday evening at 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Watching on Facebook, please click the like button and leave a positive comment. And please share with others. YouTube watchers, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. Help spread the good news of Jesus Christ.